Good morning, interweb. Bill reads out a spooky listener-submitted story. I ask if Halloween has lost its magic. Boy, I really hope not. In Cairn, those pesky companies are at it again, this time besmirching a woman called Yethara. Some Artifexia follow-up, and then we round off proceedings with a long, some might say too long, nerdy ramble about music in worldbuilding. Also, next month is the annual Christmas quiz, so get your submissions in. All that, plus lots more, in this month's episode. Bill, we're on episode 70.
Episode 70, the 84th episode?
Sure, I can't convert from base 12 to base 10 on the fly very readily. Oh, wait, it was 7 times... What's 7 times 12? That is, in fact, 84, correct?
Yeah.
84 episodes. My God. Been going since, what, 2015? Oh.
Something like that, yeah.
Mental.
Yeah, I think the start of 2015.
Absolutely insane. We really, listeners, we really got this, monumental milestone of an episode off to a great start. We spent about 10 minutes trying to sync audio. It was great crack. So here's hoping the rest of this recording is going to be a little bit more auspicious than the start. I have some quick, PSA style stuff to put at the start of the show, Bill, if that's okay.
Podcast service announcements.
Exactly. Number one, we talked a few shows ago about the electro-neolithic. The whole idea that I was toying with the idea of incorporating a sort of low-tech culture in this setting that I'm building on the channel, but also giving them like little splashes of modernity with electricity, etc. And I asked people to like weigh in on like how feasible that sort of like technological mishmash was. I just want to say to people, like I got the emails, I have read them, I'm processing them. I'm not really going to read them out on show because it's kind of stuff for me to study on my own. So, but your messages have been received, and thank you very, very much. And keep them coming. Right? If any sort of expertise in how electricity works and how a Neolithic style culture may be able to incorporate it, see past episodes, do keep emails coming. All right?
Excellent. Yep.
Okay.
Please do.
Point one. Point two, we had mentioned ages ago that Jade City was a book that we were going to read and review. So as a little roadmap for people, we are not doing that today. We're recording a normal episode today. The next episode we record will be the Christmas pub quiz episode with all the gang. And then I'm thinking thereafter, the first episode in the new year, we might make that a Jade City episode.
Cool.
Purely because, people over Christmas, if, you can get yourself the book and use that time to read the book, and then we'll talk about it later. I think it kind of works logistically well that way.
And we haven't read a fiction in a while.
In a while, yeah. Aside from your fiction.
Yes.
Exactly. So yeah, let's do that. Speaking of the Christmas pub quiz, point number 3, that is a thing. It is happening next month. Wonderful. If you would like to send in any questions, please feel free to do so. You can email us. Contact details are in the description of the show. The deadline for submissions I'm going to set as the 1st of December. If we get stuff after the 1st of December, I think I said September there. December.
I think you said December.
Oh, did I? Okay.
I think you said December.
December. If we get anything after the 1st of December, it's not going to be able to make it in the show because it'll conflict with the recording time. So you have from the release of this podcast to the 1st of December to email in us a quiz suggestion. If you want, you can just write it out in an email. That's fine. Ideally, though, I'd like to get recordings from actual recordings from people of people reading out the questions. It's just more fun and entertaining that way. Avoid multiple choice questions because they're not as fun as straight up questions. And if you're recording, leave a significant gap between the asking of the question and the answer, so I don't spoil it for myself when I'm reviewing the questions. And that, I think, is about it. Does that make sense, Bill?
Yeah, or you could send it as 2 audio files.
One audio file is slightly easier, otherwise we have a mess of audio files. Honestly, it doesn't really matter. as long as you don't spoil me when I'm reviewing. You, dear listener, don't spoil me when I'm reviewing the questions. So yeah, contact details in the show notes. Deadline 1st of December. Okay.
Excellent.
Cool. And final PSA. This is directed directly at you, Bill. It's not even a PSA. This is more of a request. Avatar 2, everyone's favorite fictional fantasy, is or the latest installment in everyone's favorite fictional fantasy, is coming out mid-December sometime.
Okay.
I would like to watch this movie and talk about it because I've mentioned before, I think it's probably going to be an utter car crash, and sometimes utter car crashes can be very, very fun. And so in the spirit of the old Star Wars episodes we did, how about you and I go to a cinema in Meat Space, watch this, and then we'll do a review episode on it.
Yeah, if I can find a schedule for that.
Yeah, we'll work if we can work the dates. Let's make it happen. And we might, dear listeners, we might roll in the Avatar review in the Jade City podcast. So like first half is talking about Avatar, second half is talking about Jade City. It might be a standalone thing. All depends on the scheduling. But like ideally, I think that's what I would like to do.
Cool.
All right, those are my PSAs. Bill, follow up. Have you got anything?
We got an email from Oscar Keane, who addressed a question to me about Yar to Yarllen and what Yar is up to these days. So in not the most recent episode, but the episode before that, our latest update from Yar's exploits was that he was acting as a sort of an independent captain under the Tamar Company. After some deaths in his family, he became a contract captain, as the term is, where he owns his own ship, but is still working kind of with the Tamar Company. The question here is, on the legal status of Yar to Yarllen, what is the standard for a company captain? Do they own and could feasibly sell their ship, or is their equipment company property? Does this change from company to company, or is this a standard part of all Abeski legalese? So in general, the vessels are owned by the companies. Like when you're in a trading company in real life, or when you're in a navy in real life, the captains aren't usually the owners. They're owned by the overall organization. So regular Abeski or Tamari captain could not own their own or does not own their own ship. They couldn't feasibly sell it. In Yar's case, he raised that financing independently, so he is kind of nominally the owner. But there's stakes in it from other people, so he could probably try and sell his own ship. But if he did that, his investors would probably have him murdered for not providing a good return.
Oh, but sure, could he not just pay their investors back?
But he would probably not make a profit.
Doing so.
Yeah, which would be what they'd be expecting. They invested in him to get a profit and to achieve a political aim.
Sure. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, he is the owner of his ship nominally, but standard practice is that the captains do not own their ships.
Yeah. Or at least, I don't know whether he himself personally is, but it's not owned by the company. It's privately owned outside of the company. He has at least some financial stake in it. But in general, an Abeski company owns the ship, and the captain is just employed by them. It's
like Yar is a VC-backed douchebag.
You know what, Edgar?
What?
It's extremely like that.
Is it really? Oh, God. What an awful human being. Cool. All right. Updates on Yar. I have an email. This one comes from Jamie Gilson. And in the last show, we had a whole tangent about fig Newtons and how we call them fig rolls, and then they're called fig Newtons, or I can't remember the exact term, in the States. And then that got us to ask, why are they called that? And apparently they come from a town called Newton. And I don't really remember, but I think I said something like, if someone should go out and take a picture of themselves holding a fig Newton under a fig tree in Newton, the town. And like, you see, this is a very small podcast, right? Like I'd say, I don't have the exact figures, but I reckon there's like no more than a few hundred people who listen to these. At max, and I'm like, no one's actually going to do that. But lo and behold, Jamie Gilson steps up to the plate, and Jamie says, as per Edgar's request on the live chat of the last show, I took some photos of me with a fig Newton right next to a sign marking the entrance to Newton. I don't believe that there are any fig trees left within the town borders, so unfortunately such a tree does not feature in the photos. Also, not featuring is the Dunkin' Donuts medium iced coffee, brackets, another local delicacy that I had with me. And they include a picture of themselves holding the fig Newton. So that picture is now chapter art. Links in the show notes. Go check it out. It's wonderful. This is the sort of like silliness that I really enjoy. This is really great.
That's fantastic. Those are great photos. Thank you very much, Jamie. And
I also have I have a small point I wonder about this, not to turn this into the Newton podcast, but it says on the sign, welcome to Newton, the Garden City. Now, I know that there's like, isn't there a state that has a state in the States that's called the Garden State?
New Jersey.
New Jersey. Is Newton in New Jersey?
No, it's in Massachusetts.
Okay. So I know it could be used that way, but I also know that like a garden city is like an urbanism term. Like it's a type of way of building an urban environment.
Right.
I can't remember. I think this came around the mid last century, and there's a whole idea of like neo-urbanism trying to create like a more thoughtful space for humans to live, and I believe it's called the Garden City. So my thought here is, I wonder, is Newton a garden city, like in the urban planning sort of sense? I don't know the answer to that, but it's just something that popped into my head when I saw Garden City, because it means two different things. That phrase, and I'm intrigued. But yes, thank you, Jim.
I'm not seeing it on list of garden cities on Wikipedia.
Okay, I'm going to do a quick Googling. Hold on. Yeah, because Canberra is a garden city. Wow. Because
Canberra's very green, I think, yeah.
They do tend to be called, like I have here, Letchworth Garden City. Oh God, what is that? Wellwyn Garden City. They tend to be kind of called Garden City, but Sunnyside Gardens. That's cute. So I guess Newton is a garden city in the same sense that New Jersey is a garden state. Yeah, okay, cool. Just a thought that popped in. Any more emails, Bill?
We have another one from Iana Kellam. I hope I am pronouncing that right, Iana.
Yeah, it could be palatalized L, so like Liana.
It specifies that it's not an L in the email.
Oh, does it? Oh, I didn't read that. Oh, crap. Yep. This person is a patron of the main show as well. God, that's terrible, because I've been calling them Liana for ages now. Oh, yeah. I would like to clarify my name. My name Liana starts with a capital I, not lowercase l. Damn it. How did we even... Iana? Yeah, I guess Iana. Iana Kellam.
Iana, yeah. I guess so.
What has Iana got to say?
I really enjoy listening to you guys' stories and ideas, and I really like the world building part. Thank you very much. Question though, have you ever written yourselves into your stories? It would be really cool if Bill could somehow create two characters that are sort of based on you both. Will you make yourselves a civilian, a hero, or maybe a villain? You could change the names, of course. It would be fun if you could write it in a way where it would leave us guessing. I have never done that. I would be, first of all, worried that I would just like make a kind of a weird Mary Sue character that would just be kind of annoying and not interesting for other people and kind of cringy. Are you saying, Bill, that if you were to create a character based on me, they would be Mary Sue because you like me so much that you present me in the best possible light? Obviously, bro. Obviously. Bro. You know I love you. Love you too, man.
Can I interject here real fast? Just
Sure.
The I love you made me think of something. Myself and the captain have this running gag that we do where we say like terms of affection to one another in Korean.
Oh.
And for those who know about Korean, it has like different speech levels, like different levels of formality. But to say I miss you in Korean, you say Bogo Sipseumnida, and that's in informal language. And it basically means like I want you, as in you are not here, I miss you, I want you. And that's how normal Koreans would use it, because if you're in a romantic relationship, you're going to use informal language. But we like to take the piss a little bit, and we use the I don't know if it's the highest level of deference, but it's up there. And we go Bogo Sipseumnida, which is like super posh and formal. And like, if you ever read any blogs in Korean about this, they'd be like, no one would ever say this. And like, and then they sort of go on to construct like hypothetical scenarios where you want to say, I miss you, but in a hyper formal language. And the two of us just rock around the house shouting, Bogo Sipseumnida at one another. And it's very funny. Because you're
awfully cute.
It's so absurd. It's just so absurd. And if any Korean were to ever hear us, if we ever do go back to Korea, I want to like loudly and proudly proclaim that in the street and just watch everyone go like, ignorant foreigners. But anyway. So you don't want to create a Mary Sue of me. Okay, cool.
But I guess there are examples of sort of similar things you could do. If you ever watched the TV show The Venture Brothers, that's essentially just made by two guys, and there's a lot of just two guy pairings among the characters in the show. There's two guys that hang out all the time, like they come in pairs very much. So maybe there's less cringy ways to do it, but yeah, I'm not sure I'm enough of a good character writer to get away with doing something like that.
I think, I don't want to, I'll just talk about myself here, not you, Bill, but like, I think we are just so boring and vanilla that like, what are you going to do?
I'm just going to talk about myself. We are boring.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah. I guess I'll extend that a little bit further. I'd say just like we in general, like most people are like kind of boring, and like, writing the story or creating a character based on most IRL people, like it's kind of dull. Like I get up in the morning, I have breakfast, I begin work, and then I watch telly at night and go to bed. And it's like, that doesn't make for a very interesting character. And I would try to, when I read this email, I tried to think like, what would an Edgar analog be in a fantasy world? Like, I can't.
A scholar entertainer.
Well, no, see, the thing is, maybe an entertainer, yeah. Someone who talks really fast for a living. Like a circus sideshow sort of thing. Come see this guy talk at like 300 words a minute. I think with you, it's easier, much easier, because you give off shocking, like, I'm an academic vibes. So I could totally write you as some sort of like scholar, dude in like ministeriat library sort of jazz, but like I wouldn't know what to do with me, like.
But should I not be a bard?
Maybe, but less that you're out there playing in taverns and more that you'd be teaching music. The scholar thing, you emanate scholar, man. You really do.
I don't know how, but thank you.
Definitely do. But I think I agree. I think I would generally have no compulsion to ever reflect myself in anything I do. Because, much like what you're saying, it can turn into shock and cringe, shock and fast. And I'd be much more comfortable doing that with others, Mm-hmm. Like if there's a cat in my fantasy world, I'll make it be like my cat. Sort of thing.
What's your cat called, Edgar?
My cat's called Duck.
Duck. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's great.
That's absolutely. Can you put a picture of your cat as album art?
I can. I cool. can. You know what I'm going to do? I'm actually also going to include, because much like most
your cat
people,
with a figure roll.
Done. That's going to be in the album. I'm going to rest.
Sorry, I interrupted you there with my excellent idea. What were you going to say?
No, back up. The excellent idea. I am going to put a fig roll on my cat's head. My cat hates when I put stuff on their head. It's hilarious. I'm constantly balancing remotes on their head and they're just like stupid human. It's great. Much like most people, my cat is actually pretty dull and boring. Like, it's lovely, but doesn't really get up to much. My brother's cat, who's called Wednesday after the Neil Gaiman character. Technically his full name is Mr. Wednesday. And he is literally a character. Like, he is a crazy cat. And part of me wants to just shoehorn a picture of him in instead, because I have some golden pictures of that cat just being completely stupid, like completely daft. Whereas my cat is like quite sensible. So listeners, there may be various cats in chapter art at this stage. Go check it out.
I do something similar with my dog as to balancing stuff on her. She we used to do this trick where I'd put like treat. She'd lie down or kind of lay down on the ground on her belly, and I'd put treats on her paws and on her nose, and like make her wait before she was allowed to have them. And she was very, very good and very, very patient. And I got like more elaborate with it. So I put her favorite toy on her back, and I have this great photo of her like glaring at me, just like totally done with my shit, waiting for me to allow her to take her toy.
But I would have always thought that with dogs, they'd be like, this is a fun game me and the human are doing. Whereas you do the same thing with a cat, and the cat has no interest in your nonsense ever. Like, at no point ever do they go, we're playing together. It's like, get out of my house, human. Why are you here? Anyway. Oh my God, cat tangent. So that was Iana's email. You have a final thing, correct?
I do, yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. So last episode, because I'd written a sort of a spooky one for Halloween, you asked listeners to submit any of their spooky stories, and we got a few, but there's one that I'd like to read out here. This is from Reddit, from Rekjensen, a frequent commenter and contributor. Mm-hmm. I'll just get straight into it. This is, they say it's written loosely as a log from a Ministry of Orientation survey expedition to the Creeping Green, known more formally as the Bryophytic Coast, an area just beyond the known and attested lands.
Ooh, already creepy.
A great city on a coast of great cities. Around each corner, towers that dwarf even the spire of Mir. Buttressed viaducts fly overhead, but silent, the city's abandoned for quite some time. Each surface is coated in moss, like a shroud over an entire nation. No bones remain. Things lay where they were dropped. No animals or birds have been seen or heard since the expedition arrived. Their harbours are choked with partial wrecks of ships and piers. Roofs have collapsed in places. All layered in the rich, dark green moss. Stairs and walkways are slick with it, but it is easily kicked away. The expedition rounded the Cape and sailed the coast for a few days, passing shrouded, silent cities every few hours, each larger than the one before. The coast is forested river valleys, and the forests now encroach on the silent cities. Moss covers the ground even there and shrouds the trunks. The cities farthest along the coast sport a fence of great stone statues, slick and black, untouched by the moss save their granite plinths. All face up the valleys toward the forest. At night, the howling is like wind. It comes from the night forest, low and in every direction. It starts as soon as the last light disappears over the sea. It's driving the men mad. We see no sign of animals by day. Hunting and scouting parties always return by dusk, but each morning we seem to be a few men fewer.
Oh, that's really great.
Yeah, that's good.
I really enjoyed that. As you're reading there, I was kind of like, oh, I like this. This is like the horror of empty spaces. And it, like, there's no, like, bad guy. And it reminds me sort of, I can't think of the exact subreddit, but there's one subreddit I see sometimes on my feed where it's people posting a load of, like, big empty spaces, and it triggers a sort of, like, a spine chilling effect. Yeah, I can't remember. If I can find a subreddit, I'll put it in the in the show notes, but I can't remember the exact name. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. They're kind of going for this sort of effect. But then at the end, much like Bill circa like 2018, there's the one line at the end that makes you go, oh, snap. And that's cool. Like there's, and I really enjoy when things aren't described and it left up to your imagination, because your imagination will always make things way worse than it actually is. So I'm glad that Rekjensen didn't be like, and then we saw the great black wolf with its teeth, and I'm like, oh yeah, great. It's cool that like we don't know what this is, and that makes it all the more sinister and creepy. So that is a very cool Halloween story. I like that.
I'm trying to find that Reddit now.
I don't know what it is. There's a bunch of those kind of like trigger fear responses Reddits that I kind of enjoy. Like Tasselophobia is another one.
Oh, fear of the sea.
Yeah, and it's just pictures of the open ocean. And like I'm not scared of the ocean. Like it's fine. I am no more scared of it than I am of any other water. But just something in the way that these pictures are shot and edited, it just like maximally triggers anxiety. And it's kind of like, I don't know, it's almost like people who enjoy horror films, you go it for the sort of the rush of feeling, the adrenaline of feeling a bit perturbed. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I'll see if I can find the Reddit. Please don't search now. We have a show to do. Speaking of Halloween, did you get up to anything fun in the Halloween before we crack into the main room?
I did not. I didn't really have time to because I was traveling like the week before, and I was only back a few days beforehand, and I didn't have anything to attend, so I didn't get a chance to put a costume together. But I did my shopping earlier that day, and as I was in Aldi, there was a Helleslager for sale, which was just called Hell. So I was like, I'll drink the Hell beer on Halloween. Why not? So I drank my Helleslager. That was about it.
Without turning this into a big, massive discussion, because again, we have a show to do, I think Halloween is losing its magic. And that makes me a little bit sad. Now,
for you or generally?
See, this is the thing I'm about to say. Certainly in my area, so not just personally for me, but like in my surroundings, but it may not be, the broader world. But like trick-or-treating, trick-or-treating was such a staple part of like my childhood. And it was like this mad adventure, because I grew up in rural Ireland. And so like I only have like 3 or 4 neighbors that you could walk to. The rest you have to drive to. So everyone had to get like barreled into a car, and we'd drive miles and miles to like, take in the entirety of the surrounding population for trick-or-treating. And it was this like epic big quest, and it was so cool. And we haven't had trick-or-treaters here for years and years. Like I cannot remember the last time we've had trick-or-treaters, and every year we buy sweets, and I'm always left with a sense of sadness that no one came to the door. And then I was like, okay, well, we don't live in the town per se. Maybe the idea of like trick-or-treating via car is gone out of fashion. But I was talking to my brother about it, and he lives in the heart of the town. Easy walking distance to any of the estates that have like, they're teeming with children. And he's like, no, we never get trick-or-treaters either. And it's like, I really don't want to see that tradition going away, if it is going away. That's really upsetting, because, be a kid, dress up, do funny things for the neighbors, and it's such a lovely vibe. Like Halloween's a great holiday, and I really hate to see it diminished.
Yeah, I would be sad as well.
Do you get trick-or-treaters?
Well, I live in an apartment building at the moment, so no.
You can still trick or treating. Bill, next year you need to go trick or treating in your apartment building.
Fine. You can come with me.
I will. I can relive my childhood. That'd be great.
We'll dress up as our self-insert characters.
Yes, precisely. So you're gonna come dressed as you usually dress because you look like you're straight out of Cairn. So I'll have to do the load here.
And where like my family home, there aren't really any kids around there anymore. But I teach a lot of kids, and a lot of them went trick or treating. So
okay, good. Yeah, because I don't want to see that go away. That's really lovely. It's a really, really lovely practice. Yeah. Okay. Follow up done? Question mark?
Follow up done.
Okay, dokay. All right. World billing. Engaged.
World billing. Go.
Is it go? Okay. What do we got?
We have a pamphlet, a handbill distributed in Cairn.
A handbill?
Yeah, like a leaflet.
Oh, I've never heard it referred to as a handbill.
It's old-fashioned.
Oh, okay, cool.
An account of the orator Yethara, her falsehoods and her crimes. The orator, known as Yethara, has preached across the Abesk, from Jikav to her alleged home city of Vilv. In her wake, agitation and strife has bubbled forth to disrupt the peace and prosperity of these great cities. But who is this agitator? Yethara claims to be from Vilv, yet the authors, possessed of no small familiarity with that great city, have not found any there who knew of her, neither in her youth nor as fellow workers. She preaches of justice and freedom for the workers and groundsfolk, but what does she know of labour and working conditions? In all her speeches, she never tells what her trade was before she set out to crash Abeski society. The authors of this pamphlet can reveal that Yethara, far from being a humble Vilvan worker questing for justice for her fellow groundsfolk, is in fact a hypocrite, a subtle infiltrator fomenting agitation to disrupt the trade of the cities and the great companies that have made the Abeski a prosperous nation. Yethara was born indeed to a Vilvan mother, but by an Arthani father. She was raised on a stinking vessel of that nomadic nation, learning from the cradle not of industry and toil and honest trade, but of treachery, mendacious dealings and jealousy. Having spent the greater portion of her years aboard barges, she donned the guise of an Aveski only well into adulthood, and then only to pursue a plan of sabotage and dissent. In her tour of preaching her agitations to the groundsfolk, she travels not by airship. The sky, beloved of all Abeski, is not her path. All true Abeski, undeceived by the glamour of dissent, recognize her beliefs as dangerous. Understanding this, she sticks to the ground and the waterways, knowing she will not be challenged, but instead receive aid from the disaffected and the hostile nations who share in her jealousy. Upon the sovereign decks of her Thani vessels, she is shielded from the bailiffs and constables and marines. In the deep forests, she is hidden from the sight of those vessels that protect our communities. We wrote of the strife to be found in the wake of this orator. When she spoke in Lansk, she provoked a riot against the bailiffs, wherein dozens were killed. In Mirsphere, a mob stormed the Lesian Tower and slaughtered another score of innocents. In Utvev, a fire claimed a company depot, though the docks and the Earthani fields were spared any such disaster. It is clear to all that Yethara is not a mere orator, preaching a creed of justice. The inescapable conclusion is that Yethara is a vile conspirator. Whether she is among the leaders of the agitators attempting to bring our nation to ruin, it cannot be said. But she is certainly the most visible figure and the most dangerous. Don't let this agitator destroy us. Protect your family, protect your prosperity. If you know of agitation or conspiracy, tell your bailiffs and tell your bosses. Pamphlet anonymously distributed ahead of a Labour rally in Mearsphere.
This bill, this is cool.
Oh, thank you.
Do you remember I talked about how, like, when the good guys win out, I really don't want the good guys to be really good and to be grey and stuff. This plays into this really well, because this Yethara, how do you pronounce her name again?
Yethara.
Yethara character is, you can read this, well, at least I can read this person as being like a heroine or as being a villain quite easily. And that's really cool, and I really, really enjoy that.
Okay.
All right. That response makes me think that I've misread that.
Keep going.
that was my point. You know,
Okay.
Respond. What's with the hesitancy? Because for me, that's really obvious.
I was going for this being obviously very, very biased propaganda.
Oh, yeah, sure. But like, you can take the position that, like, if it's biased propaganda, this person is a villain. If it's not biased propaganda, this person is a hero. Like, you can read it both ways depending on who you.
No, the other way around.
Sorry, yeah, the other way around. But you can read it both ways depending on who you trust. So you're not presenting a sort of very, very, very cut and dry. Yethara is completely awesome. It's up to you, reader, to decide who you trust in this situation. And that's cool.
Okay.
I think that's really cool. But anyway, sorry. I'm breaking from the format. Thoughts, summaries, then I'll ask questions.
Yeah, so that, I mean, I think it's all fairly clear. Yethara was mentioned before in the riot that happened in Lansk way back. That was kind of our first suggestion of the agitation and the labour movement. Yethara spoke at that, and that was kind of what caused the riots. So we have heard that name before. And this is a pamphlet produced and printed as a kind of a counter propaganda against the labour agitation movement, to discredit her and by proxy call the entire movement into suspicion.
Sure. All right. Orator. Can you talk about that term? Because I feel like you're using it as a noun and a title here. Like, can one have a job description as an orator? Because you say here, like, at the bottom, you go, it is clear to all that Yethara is not a mere orator preaching the creed of justice. Is this like a person who goes around and, like, calls out laws everywhere, or is this just an adjective?
It's definitely a noun, but it's not like a formal position. It's just like she's known for speaking publicly.
Okay, so she's just a public speaker.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. The Earthani. So if I get this correct, it's like is she presenting to the world as an Abeski who's displeased with the way Abeski culture works, and then this pamphlet is like, we've uncovered the truth. She's actually not Abeski. She's actually Earthani, and hence, like, she's like this vile hypocrite and conspirator.
So she is publicly, she is just an Abeski woman,
right?
A groundsfolk. There is among people mixing, ethnic and national mixing. So there will be people who have blood of other nations who are part Earthani or part whatever. And this pamphlet is making the claim that she is in fact an Earthani, not an Abeski person, as she presents herself to be.
Oh, okay. And
they are making that claim.
And do I take it then that this claim is perhaps spurious?
Perhaps.
Okay, but even if it weren't, like, who cares? Do you know?
Racists.
I mean, yeah.
Bigots.
I mean that's fair. But like, she can be a Erthani and go like, what the Abeski are doing is incorrect. But yes, yeah, this appeals to like, dear populace, this person is an other. They can't be trusted.
Exactly.
Whereas if she's presented as an Abeski, then that represents a serious like intellectual threat, because one of your own is calling out the system. And that's quite dangerous. You were like, Yethara was born indeed to a Vilvian mother. So she's a Besky on the mother side, I'm assuming, but by an Erthani father.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, I wonder about like how, I guess, like culture is passed down. Is there any sort of rules and regs in this culture? I'm reminded of, isn't it in Jewish culture that if your mother is Jewish, you, the child, are a Jew, but if your father's Jewish, then you're not. It like passes down through the female line. Is it something like that?
I don't know, but that sounds familiar. I've heard something to that effect before. Yeah.
So the question is something of that effect going on here? Like, is she, is the fact that her father is an Erthani makes her, in the eyes of the general populace, more Erthani, or is it just like no one gives a crap?
I think what they're going for is that like she's using this partial claim, like that her mother was Vilvan, as her but that she was raised as Erthani is the main thrust there. She was raised aboard vessels and things.
Okay. So the goal
is the more relevant factor.
Sure. That's cool. In the next line, you were like, she was raised on a stinking vessel of that nomadic nation. Very, very considerate of others there. Learning from the cradle, not of industry and toil and honest trade, but of treachery, mendacious dealings, and jealousy. I do. There's kind of like, I read a bit of grind set into this. Do you know the term grind set?
I unfortunately do.
Yeah, and it feels a bit like that. It's like, you're raised to think like you gotta like work hard in industry and capital and toil, and then that's a virtue. And it's
a bit Protestant work ethic as well.
It's a bit, yeah, for sure. And I just think that's really sad. Like, these are obviously things that one should do. One should work hard, and one should be studious and diligent in things. But like, that's not all that life is. And I think sometimes in the modern world, we all kind of, or a lot of people tend to kind of forget that. It's all about the grind set. And you're suddenly 80 and you realize you've been grinding your entire life and life's been terrible. There's more to life than just like trying to climb the capitalist ladder. So yeah, it just reminded me of that. And I do love the way they present the Ertani here. I just like their characteristics are treachery, mendacious dealings, and jealousy. Like, I'm going to work on the assumption that perhaps the Ertani have other traits, like they value family. They might, it's just,
yeah. They like boats.
But no, we focus on these sort of things. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, and of course, like an Abeski presenting honest trade, when there's a huge thing of just, tricking other nations into exploitative business arrangements and things.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
What the companies do.
Exactly. And then further down, you were like, all true Abeski, undeceived by the glamour of the scent, recognize her beliefs as dangerous. I don't know if this is deliberate, but I really enjoy that true Abeski, because that really plays into kind of racist sort of stereotypes. Like, I am a true Abeski, and like just defining like what is a true insert person here is just like a useless, silly thing that any sensible person wouldn't even engage in. Like, what is a true Irish person? Like, that doesn't exist. Like, a true Irish person. But it's very useful for riding up the races. So I feel like this anonymous, the anonymous author, that's a very deliberate use of words there, I think.
Yes,
true Abeski, because it really does lean into that. And
that it's not just allegiance is based on more than just kind of ethnicity, because race isn't a very strongly developed concept. They don't have it in the same sense in this setting. But like, to be an Abeski, you're kind of, you're pro company and so on.
Yeah.
This is our national belief.
Sure. Yeah, and that really plays into that. So that's cool. Just that's really fun. The use of one word really drives home a lot of subtle meaning there, and I think that's really awesome. And I guess the final thing on my end, unless I think of anything else in a second, is at the bottom, pamphlet anonymously distributed ahead of Labour rally in Mearsphere.
Mm-hmm.
Any reason why it's anonymously distributed? Would this not be an opportunity for the counter Yethara to step in and be like the figurehead of this anti fomentation thing that's going on?
Potentially. Yeah, it could be. Maybe there isn't a single figure to do that yet.
Okay.
But maybe it's Yar and he's off busy doing something else.
Maybe it's Yar. It's always Yar.
But yeah, so this was printed by the Tamar Company.
Okay. So that's why it's anonymous, because they don't really want to be saying the Tamar Company, do they? Or maybe not. Maybe they're fine with that. I don't know.
I think it's more of a like doing things at a slight remove. So our plausible deniability about it. It's just like this will be the fuel for the right kind of people who are open to hearing its message.
Sure.
But without it being like an official company statement or whatever.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And I guess one final point. So, am I reading correctly that Yethara's methods are one? Oh, we're going to get banned from YouTube again for this. Are one of like violence. Could we talk before about remember the whole thing about like violence versus non-violence as strategies? And we talked about Gandhi and his non-violence worked in the context of there already being violence, etc. Her shtick here, I think, from what you've read, is that she's very much like violent action is what's needed. Like she doesn't come across as a pacifist, correct?
That would be the implication of this document, sure.
Yeah, whether or not we believe it to be true.
Yeah. I would say it's not really the case.
Okay, so you think the actual state of affairs is that she's just out there like raising awareness, telling people don't cooperate, but not telling people to go murder people.
Yeah, she's more probably like calling for strikes and things and maybe for resistance, but she's not actually calling for a mob to storm the Lessian Tower or for go murder the bailiffs or anything like that.
Sure. And is her effect as great as this pamphlet is leading us to believe? Because they list a whole bunch of things. Like when she spoke in Lang, she provoked a riot against the bailiffs. In Mearsphere, a mob stormed the tower. And again, I get that they're claiming this. It may not be the actual case. But they have a whole bunch of things where they're like, she was responsible for this. Is she that influential? Or are they just trying to quell someone who potentially has the ability to, in the future, become extremely influential?
She's definitely very influential. But if you look back at what actually happened in Lansk, I'm pretty sure that was the companies and it was the companies that provoked that riot.
Yeah.
So they're pretty much telling a straight lie there.
Was it the same thing with the mob, with the tower as well?
I haven't named that before. I haven't discussed that incident, other than that was when Yar's father was killed.
Oh, did we not?
But I didn't name that at the time. But that's what that is. That's the Lessian Tower was where Yar's father and uncle were killed. Did
we not have a piece of prose that you wrote where some dudes took over one of the spires? Was that called a tower?
We did, yes. I haven't referred to that here.
Oh, okay.
That was the thing from the barricades. The something declaration on the barricades. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So that's the whole.
So that happened afterwards. That happened like a good while after the riot in Lansk, around the same time as the mob in Mearsphere.
Mm-hmm. And then as well, I suppose in Otviev, a fire claimed the company depot. I mean, they don't actually say that she did it, but like they imply that it could just be a fire. Like fires happen.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes things burn.
Yeah, exactly. I still hold to what I the sentiment I opened up with. Like, depending on who you choose to believe here, this person can be a radically different character, and that is cool. I think that's really cool. So I enjoy that. Do you have plans?
I mean, it's pretty naked propaganda, but it's not, it has to be believable on some level for it to be functional.
Yeah, and I think what makes it believable is probably the anonymously distributed, because if this were distributed with the Tamar companies or the companies written on it, that would feel more like an official thing. Like, this could be some dude who is just like angry at this person and is trying to like, information warfare back against her. So that makes it feel a little bit more believable that it could just be a random person or set of people as opposed to like an official entity issuing this propaganda. For me anyways.
It makes it feel more kind of grassroots or something.
That's the word. That is, God, Bill, you really do have a gift for like eye waffle for like 5 minutes when one word is needed to sum it up, and then you just put it at the end, and it's great. I can cut that whole part there. It's wonderful. But any plans, final thing on my end, any plans for, given that this Yethara character is influential, any plans of developing her thread going forward? Because really Yar is the only character that we have, or maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like he's like a solid character in this setting that we've built up a continuous backstory to. And I wonder, would Yethara be worthy of getting the Yar treatment?
Potentially, yeah. Potentially. It would be good, perhaps. Yeah, I think I do need a few more actual characters. Yeah,
and I think that the fact that you don't have a lot of like long-standing characters kind of falls out of the medium that this is in, like little bits of writing from disparate people all around the place. But I guess if we've more people to hook onto, that's a cool thing, I think. And particularly on opposing sides here, which is also kind of dope. Have you got?
Yeah, because I feel like I feel like writing characters is a bit of a weakness, but I was happy with what I did with Yar in the last thing. That there was a progression in his character, there was a change in his character, so it's something I can probably feel a bit more confident on now.
But also, like Bill, like I don't think anyone here is expecting you to be like a seasoned novelist here. Do you know?
I know, but like still, I want to do stuff right.
Yeah.
I want to do stuff well, rather.
I think if one does the stuff to the best of their ability, and then people can feed off that, and that's appreciated. You don't have to be Stephen King here,
I'd rather not be. Do you not like Stephen King? Not particularly,
no. Do you not? He had,
no.
Without getting into it, because I don't want to talk about this because it's just terrible, but he did have a funny thing there with Elon Musk. I thought he lay it to smack it down.
That was funny. I mean, I've nothing against him personally. I think I'm sure he's a perfectly cool guy and a perfectly nice man. I've read a couple of his books, and I feel he always kind of messes up the ending. He doesn't know how to write good endings. In my experience of reading him. See,
that's I wouldn't have thought that because I have not finished any of his books. Like
you ended at the right time.
Like, yeah, that's why I really enjoy his writings. Like the Dark Tower, I read the first Dark Tower book, but I like in college I saw the mammoth tome that was whatever the 7th or 8th installment of it, and I was like, do you know what? I'm not willing to dedicate the rest of my life to reading these books, so just book 1 will do me. And I liked book 1. I thought it was fine, but maybe
book 1's quite good.
But maybe he messes us up going forward. I don't know. But any case, closing points on your side. What have I missed?
I think the only thing was that the Lesian Tower was the event where the Yarllen were killed.
I want a sitcom called the Yarllen. I want someone to write a theme tune for the Yarllen. That's what I want.
If only we knew musicians.
If only.
No, I think that's kind of it. Like as I said, it's fairly barefaced propaganda. But I think it's going to be effective for the people who it needs to be effective for, the people who are already primed to agree. Yeah, I think we've got it all.
Cool. All right. Have you been watching my stuff? Have you got questions to ask me? Because I don't know, the last couple of podcasts I've kind of like, I'm not really interested in talking about my stuff on the podcast, which is weird because the whole podcast is meant to exist to talk about my stuff. Over the years, I've become much more interested in, listener follow-up and your world building. But if you have pertinent things to bring up, please do.
The geology ones, fine. I think I got it all. The last one I skimmed through because I don't have G plates, so I just kind of followed the progression of it. All the theory kind of was in the previous one, and it all sort of made sense. I did have some question from the luminosity brightness kind of one, if I can remember what it was.
Oh, japers, that's going back a bit.
Yeah, but we haven't talked about it.
Have we not?
No.
Wow, I'm finding it hard to keep track of because I'm now producing more stuff. So there's always more stuff there's a number of things that come out in between recording sessions. So I find it hard to keep track of where we are.
There was something about distance from the inhabited planet to the other bodies in the system. Right?
Right.
And some part of the sheet. Is that correct?
Sure. That is a thing that exists in nature.
Well, you see, the thing is, in nature, it won't be static. And I wasn't clear to me whether the sheet accounted for that.
What do you mean not
the fact that because they're all moving. So you're not at a constant distance from the next planet in the system.
Oh, hang on. You're talking about that apparent size and brightness stuff.
Yeah.
To measure the brightnesses of the planets. Yes. Okay. Yes. So the sheet does take into account their distances. And so you can enter in various different distances, and the sheet will compute how bright they'll appear. What?
How bright they will be at that distance.
Did you just laugh manically?
I think I mistook a gap in the a disruption to the call as comic timing on your part.
Yeah, because I was talking and I just hear this manic laughter. I'm like, what did I say that was so funny? Gas. Oh, brilliant. But yes, the TLDR, the sheet does take into account the movements of the planets, and it will adjust brightness of the planets based on where they are in their orbit. To an extent, because I'm not sure if anyone cares about this, but the maths used to compute that is based on empirical evidence. So we look at the planets in our system and we come up with maths to describe that situation, but the maths breaks down in certain locations. Like when Venus, for example, is way too close to the sun to be able to be viewed, there are no maths to describe that situation. We don't know how bright it would be because we can't see it. Ergo, when you take that empirical stuff and apply it to fantasy planets, you're limited by where that maths came from. And there's no kind of law of, I guess, reflection that you can just do to figure it out, or at least not if you want to be accurate. You could do a crude thing and treat these planets as mirrors or something like that. But if you want to actually treat them like real planets that have knobbly surfaces and different albedos, etc., it's all empiricism. So there are holes in it, and that is just, we're not advanced enough to know otherwise.
Yeah, there's holes in it because there's also holes in the empirical data.
Correct.
Yeah. And that kind of semi-answers my next question then, I think, because there was a thing where you said the rocky planet was visible, but then a little while later it was you can't see it because of its relative position to the sun. So you're calculating its visibility kind of as a standalone thing, and then the later thing was putting it in context in the actual system.
Correct.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I should state at this point, just to be absolutely sure, I'll link it in the show notes. We are talking about the apparent size and brightness sheet. I don't know if did we explicitly mention that?
Yes, I'm pretty sure you did.
Grand, but I'll link it below so people can follow along.
Why not say it again?
Well, sure, I just did. So you compute it as a standalone thing, and then you go in context. Could you actually see it or whatever? So yeah, that answer your questions.
I'm pretty sure it does.
That was moderately smooth. Wow. Okay.
Regarding the geology ones, I did get a little bit confused for a while when you were talking about orogeny. Because I kept hearing it as erogeny.
All right.
And I was like, well, Echo doesn't make not safe for work content. What's going on here?
What's an
and then I remembered from having read the 5th season, orogeny, and like the origins and such. And I was like, oh yeah, so that makes sense. That is a geological thing.
Wait, hold on.
But yes, it did.
Sorry, at the risk of again getting our podcast banned on YouTube, what is erogeny?
Like, erogenous zones.
Oh.
That's what I kept mishearing it as.
Orogeny. Oh, lol. Phil, I think you're the only one. The only other comments I got on that was like, I never realized that was a real word. I thought Jemison made that up. That's the only comments I got about this. No one else was mishearing it. You have a dirty mind, Mr. Bill.
Well, it's just vowels are difficult.
They are. Vowels are awful.
Vowels are very difficult.
I hate vowels. Particularly back and mid vowels. They're awful. There's a lot of in the middle there. I'm like, ugh. But yeah. It is orogeny in the sense of like mountain creation.
Glad we've got that sorted.
Glad we do too. Anything else?
No.
Cool.
No, I'm enjoying the series. I'm looking forward to watching this develop. I haven't implemented any of the stuff myself. I haven't had the time to sit down and plug my systems in. But maybe that will be a future world building.
I'm going to make everyone really mad. I'm going to show you spoilers for what's coming up just because it's so incredibly awesome and I want you to see this. So
just me?
Just you. I'm sharing my screen in a second. Listeners and viewers will get to see this eventually, but this is what is going to happen. And I am so in love with the fact that I found Worldbuilding Pasta's blog. It is amazing and it has brought a whole new level of realism to my already pedantic world building brain. Hold on a second. I need to set up Crack here. Give me a minute. Okay, you should be able to see stuff now.
Cool.
All right, look at this, Bill. Look at this. Look at this. This is a fantasy.
Oh, neat.
Oh my! Look, this is a fantasy world. Look at this. Oh,
neat.
Isn't that like? And that's what the G plates process will eventually yield when you do a full on thing, and that is modern world. 1 billion years of simulation. It's just
cool.
World building pasta has made my life. It is amazing. So cool. So sorry listeners for the tease there. I just really wanted to show Bill this. I'm going to stop sharing.
Yeah.
Okay?
That's dope. Nicely done.
That is so cool. And it's the process, like while it's extremely tedious to like do and implement, like it's make no qualms about it, it's awful. But like for that, again, you get the like an animation of 1 billion years of the physical history of a world. But also on top of that, you obviously get like a hyper accurate mountain placement because again, you're simulating all of that. But you also get to track through various orogenic processes. You can track like mass extinction events. So you can like pinpoint and be like, I know that like 200 million years ago on my planet, there can be a mass extinction happening because this type of event occurred. And so like the process of simulating this yields so much, it's ridiculous. And then also in terms of like life, if you know that like 2 continents have been separated for X amount of time, you can make a good call when it comes to speculative biology, like how divergent evolution on both of those continents might be based on how much time they're apart. And you just don't get that information if you're drawing a standard map. And it's just, I love this so much. It's so cool. So anyway, so that was me just espousing the virtues of Worldbuilding Pasta and his methodology. Go check Worldbuilding Pasta out, folks. Seriously, please do. And also, just a little plug here, go patronize them if at all you can. Last time I checked, I believe they were making something like, I think it was like 50 quid on their Patreon. They deserve way, way more. Like they are writing basically a thesis on realistic world building, and no one is doing it as good as they are. It's insane. So read their blog, and if you get value out of it, please do patronize them because like it's insane. It's insane how good it is.
Cool.
All right. Green room.
Green room.
Pretty quick green room here, I think. I would like to talk
Famous last words.
Yeah, I know, right? I'd like to talk to you about music notation systems.
Mm-hmm.
In the context of, I guess, like creating them for a fictional world.
Sure.
I want to hear your thoughts on just stuff I have to say. This is probably going to get real music nerdy. So if you're not into this sort of thing, or like I don't know, guess find the language a bit obtuse, you can duck out now. There's no further content after this, because yeah, I think this might get a bit technical. So let me. The starting point is that I've seen a couple, not very many, but a couple of attempts at creating a musical culture in fiction, beyond kind of like there's a bard singing in the corner, but actually trying to describe how the system works in terms of tuning systems, in terms of like music theory, music notation systems, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And again, it's a very, very small sample set, but I think maybe people are thinking about this in a wrong way from my perspective. Obviously, there's no right and wrong here, but just the way I think about things kind of jars with I think how people think about these things. So I suppose, yeah, we'll start with the music notation stuff. I think because coming up with a writing system for a conlang is a fun and popular thing to do. I think people tend to think that maybe the same thing applies to music. Like we have ways of notating music, and therefore, if you're going to build a music culture, you should like notate the music, and then people come up with like a bunch of systems to notate the music. And I think that's fine. Like that's like, I mean, we do that. That's grand. But I think that's a really like Western, I guess, art music sort of thing. When I think most of the time, music isn't notated, and for good reason. So do you agree with this so far? Before we get into the weeds about discussing it.
Sorry, I lost the thread a little bit there. What's a specifically Western art music thing?
Music notation, or like a dogmatic sticking to and venerating the musical notation system.
Yeah, I guess treating the printed text with primacy, I would agree, yeah.
And there are plenty of music systems, like Irish folk music, for example, that you just don't write anything down ever. Like it's purely an oral tradition.
I don't know if that's true anymore, really, but sure.
Well, yeah, but I think this leads into it. Like, I do know that Irish folk players, like when they go to write down music, they will do so just using letter names. Like they'll just write A, B, C, 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 D, A. That's their music notation system, or at least their pragmatic, expedient music notation system, and that serves the function of communicating the tune really well. And I think that like the sort of like hyper notation system that you use in like Western art music is just like not really necessary for like most musics. And in fact, I think it hinders most things if you prescribe to that idea, because you kind of hinder the development of like a strong oral tradition of music and all the subtle nuances that brings, that is eradicated when one treats music notation with primacy.
Yeah, I there are maybe like little things I would kind of clarify in that, but broadly, I think that seems fair.
So I think the point here about the world building context is that if you, dear listener, are like, I want to world build a musical tradition, of course, go and make an elaborate music notation system if you will. But I think just be aware that like many, many, many cultures function without a music notation system. And that's not a bug, that's a feature of those cultures. So don't be afraid to just go like, there is no music notation system.
Yeah, I would say it's not a requirement. Be aware that it's not a requirement to have a convincing musical culture.
I mean, if you're going to try and make a musical culture, you should make a convincing musical culture.
It's not a requirement to have a notation system in order
Yes.
to have a convincing musical culture, is what I'm saying.
Precisely. And I'll iterate the point I made a second ago. I think having a very rigid music notation system like us is a hindrance, I think. And because surely you must have experienced this in college where it's like, you know, you go to play a piece and like there's a dogmatic sort of attention to what the composer wants. Like the composer wrote here allegro. So like you don't do anything else but allegro. And it's like you follow it. And obviously, I'm being slightly reductive here, but you kind of follow it like almost like a code. You just implement the code as you go. Obviously, there's expression, etc. But I think in traditions where music notation isn't important at all, you have wonderful things where you have like local flavor on a tune. So like say everyone in a, like imagine a small island or whatever, everyone has a standard set of tunes that everyone kind of knows, but each locality, because they've learned orally from one another and not in the written form, pick up and like propagate like little inflections on how the thing is done. So you get these like unique little like subcultures within it that I think music notation eradicates.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's still... I mean, I don't want people to go away from this thinking that that means that classical music doesn't have room for innovation and thing. It's just, it's according to a narrower scope. And, you know, like in theatre, you would very, very seldom deviate in any way from the precise text. You know, the words don't change. Yeah. But you can still do a lot with that. And I think, you know, it's the same in music. It's the same in even, you know, classical music, Western art music. You don't deviate from the notes, but there is still, you can do stuff with it, with the textures and the dynamics and things.
Sure.
I want to make that clear to anyone who's not familiar, who is listening to this, that it's, you know, it's not a sterile, an entirely sterile art form.
I agree with that, and that's why I said like I'm being reductive here.
Yeah.
And like there's obviously interpretive room. Like if you listen to two classical players play the same piece on the same instrument, it'll sound different. You know, because each of these players are bringing their own thing to it. So that's point one of notation systems. Point two of notation systems, which goes back to Irish folk players just using letters of the alphabet. Again, with Western music notation, we tend to notate a lot in our notation system. Like we notate pitch, we notate length of note, we notate, or we can notate how the note is to be executed. Is it like, you know, for those who know the terms like staccato, marcato, all of these sort of things. We notate the volume of the note. Like there's a lot of notation going on. Tempo, like we really like hyper notate. And again, that's not a given. And I think probably you shouldn't seek to emulate that. Just, you know, to make it different from Western art music. You can get away with, like with the Irish folk music tradition, just notating the notes. And the rhythm is implied, left up to common knowledge. The speed is implied. You know, you could do the same. I suppose you could do the same thing for rhythm. Just notate the rhythm, but the pitch is implied because everyone knows the tune in this little village or whatever. You don't have to like reinvent Western art music, and I think you shouldn't fall into the trap of reinventing Western art music's notation system when there are many, many other forms, and those forms are not inferior for not doing all that Western art music does. It's just that like the musical culture will favor certain things if they are to notate, and that's going to notate them, and that's going to reflect in the notation system.
Yes, yeah. The important thing here is kind of criticality and reflexivity, maybe, that like what is indicated in the notation system tells you something about what is valued in that musical culture.
Correct.
And it's not always going to be the same things. And if you're going to make a notational system, you know, put some thought into that. So as you say, you're not just recreating Western art music. And I mean, we have examples of that even using the staff notation. Like, if you read a tune in a real book and listen to a recording of the head of a jazz tune, it's not going to be the same because it doesn't notate swing. The rhythms can often be very, very different from what's strictly notated.
Sure.
So, and you know, that's you say, that is implicit knowledge, that is understood within the performance practice.
Exactly. And I think you make an interesting point about what or I think both of us make an interesting point about what the culture values, but I think what they value can both be what's there and what's not in the notation system. Because you can think about, like, if they really value, say, ornamentation, for example, they might choose to then notate that, like hyper-notate that ornamentation because they really value it. Or conversely, and I think this is the case in Indian classical music, at least to a certain extent, but maybe someone correct me, how one ornaments a note and how one, like, approaches a note is hyper important. But that I don't think is notated anywhere. Actually, in fact, it almost definitely isn't because it's an improvisation sort of style. But that's still massively important to them. But like, it's so important that it's not like written down. It's a thing that you learn through craft, you know?
Yeah.
So importance goes both ways. Like,
it's assumed in the context of what you're playing that you know how to do it.
Exactly. So like they notate the more rudimentary things, or you could imagine a culture notating the more rudimentary things, and then the really important stuff has to be learned from like a master, and you need to put that on there. So importance can be both what's absent and what's not in the music system. It goes both ways. It's not like if it's important, it's got to be marked there. And I think, again, that's where like our staff notation gives us a false impression of what's going on, because like clearly all this stuff was really important to us to notate all this. Therefore, what's in the notation is the important thing, do you know?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, just using your thing of ornamentation there, historically, like in Baroque times, the ornamentation, we were just told to ornament, and it wasn't told how to ornament it precisely, for example.
But then, Bill, what happened next?
Yeah, afterwards, sure, but not every system that you're going to create is going to be the same as, you know, if it has hundreds of years of development or is kind of any kind of end stage, you know?
Yeah. I agree.
And like this is a thing I learned from doing Baroque music. Like when I was learning the oboe, you don't phrase across the bar line. You don't like slur across the bar line, and that's not written down. It was just like that was a stylistic thing that I had to learn because it was assumed. And even in modern editions of Baroque music, it won't give you those phrasings and it won't give you those ornamentations in more like modern printings of them.
I didn't know that. Is that a specific to the oboe thing?
I don't know. I remember something like that coming up in an oboe lesson that I had.
Wow.
That like it's in, for whatever reason, like, or maybe it was just in this particular piece, but you know, the phrasing starts at the start of the bar. I'm sure there are like, you know, upbeats and things where you would change that, but as a general rule in the body of whatever I was playing, it was like you tongue at the start of the bar.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jeez, yeah, I wonder if that is related to maybe wind instruments, because I don't remember, and I quite like playing Baroque music when I was in college, and I don't remember that being a thing, but like, again, we were playing
maybe it was
on
specific to the
guitar.
dance form I was doing or something, but
Could be.
You know.
Could be. So that's some thoughts that I've had on notations, just because, again, I've a couple of instances I've seen people kind of like just like do a pastiche of Western art music notation, and it's kind of like that's not how it must necessarily work. And I guess the sort of take home point is to those people, I would be like, it's not a cop out to not have a notation system. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's perfectly valid and happens all the time. And yeah, that is something that one can lean into if one so desires. The other thing I was going to say was about tuning systems. Here, folks, if you've made it this far, is where it's going to get nerdy. This is going to get obtuse, but I really do want to talk to Bill about this. So just, again, you can tune out if you're like, nah, not for me. Sometimes, again, rarely, because not many people venture into this, people say that their musical culture has a different tuning system to ours.
Mm-hmm.
So just for the record, like we use a thing called 12-tone equal temperament in Western music. And that's, where you have an octave and the space in between that interval, they are 2 notes, is divided into 12 equal notes. And we generate all of our tones from that. That is not the only way of doing it. There's multiple different ways of tuning an instrument and getting a set of notes from which music can come from. And the impression I get from, again, the few people that have forayed into this field, it feels like, could be wrong, but it feels like it's like I want to make a fictional music system. It should be different from what we currently do. Otherwise, what's the point? Therefore, let me pick from a list of tuning systems and go, they play in this tuning system. And then that's the bit of flavor text there. Mm-hmm. And it really, if that's what's happening, and I'm not just misreading stuff, that's not how music works. And like the type of tuning system a culture uses heavily influences the type of music that they have,
Well, yeah. It's foundational to it.
It's foundational to it. So again, just real nerdy stuff. I'll leave a link in the Wikipedia for people who, if you want to investigate more. There's a thing called just intonation, and that's like the air quotes purest way of tuning music. That works really well, and music sounds really nice in that tuning system. If you don't ever change keys. If you change keys, it begins to sound pretty out of tune to our ears. And so if one can't just declare my culture uses just intonation, and then you write some music in like Ableton or whatever and go, that's in just intonation. It's like, no, they wouldn't have even got to that point because the music system, the tuning system would break down for writing such a piece, if that makes sense, Bill.
It might break down, yeah. Depending on what they explore.
Sure, yeah, and I guess it's all very subjective of what you consider to be in tune and out of tune. But yeah, the tuning system will inform what they write. And then there's the Pythagorean tuning is a whole other thing as well. I'm not going to explain the details of it, but the nuts and bolts of it is that thirds, for those who know what that is, are kind of out of tune. In this system, they sound a bit off to us, and as such, it was really useful for musical traditions back in the day that didn't prioritize thirds, that thought that thirds were kind of a dissonance, and they harmonized in fourths and fifths or whatever. So it worked really well there. And so again, the tuning system influences the music, or it can work vice versa as well. But it really isn't a case of like, look at the Wikipedia list of tuning systems and then say in a bit of flavor text, they use Pythagorean tuning, because that's just not how it works.
That has further implications that you will need to account for. You can't just say that and then plug whatever in and expect it to be coherent.
Yeah, exactly. And even if you're not writing music, like I still think it's incumbent upon you in the flavor text, then go like, find out what the limitations of the tuning system is and then write that. So like they use a form of Pythagorean tuning, which suits their music really well, that harmonizes in fourths and fifths, for example. Like then you're like, oh, okay, cool, right? This person has a reason for choosing this. That's great. But you can't just list it in a stat box somewhere. Like I think that's not how it works at all. And that was my rant. Tuning systems, don't choose them for a list. Notation systems, Western art music notation is not superior to everything else, and in fact has many flaws. Don't just blindly emulate it. Look at what other cultures do and maybe go for something like that. And on top of that, no music notation system is not a cop-out. Music is an oral tradition at its heart anyways.
Yes.
Okay. Anything to add? Anything you disagree with vehemently there?
No, I don't think so. I would say, like, even thinking of it in terms of thirds and fifths is already making certain assumptions.
Yeah, and see, this is the awkward thing about this, because like, and again, we talked about how I'm never really going to do music world building, because it's like, we're so entrenched in our culture that I can't even fathom a world.
I'm too close to it.
You're too close to it. That doesn't have these intervals. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, I can't function when I don't have like thirds, fourths, fifths. Like, you know, no matter what I would do if I were to build a musical culture, it would always be a sort of like a derivative of what we currently do in the West. Just because that's what I do it. But then I think that's even more incumbent upon people to just not blindly reflect what's going on in the West, because you're already going to naturally be doing it anyways. So you should be taking precautions to not like completely ape it with the choices you make.
Yeah. Be mindful in your world building.
Be mindful in your world building. And is there anything else I wanted to say on that? I guess it's this minor point, and this is really nerdy. Along with the like, you can't just pick a tuning system from a list. I also think that it's not a good idea to pick a equal temperament from a list. And I've seen some people, I think maybe Adam Neely might be mildly responsible for propagating this a little bit, where they go like, my music culture uses 17 tone equal temperament. And that's just a stated fact. Like, it's like, the question that needs to be asked there is, how does that naturally arise? Like, do we actually get to 17 tone equal temperament outside of like modern music academia, basically? And if they get to it, why are they getting to it? Does it do anything better? Like, the whole point of us having 12 tone equal temperament is that it like relatively well fits a thing called the harmonic series with compromises, but like it does a good enough job that things sound, you know, fairly decent, and it irons out the problems that were in previous tuning systems. So there's a reason why we got the 12 tone equal temperament. One can't just declare it's 15 tone equal temperament, it's 31 tone equal temperament. Yeah. There's like pragmatics there that require like a ton of study to understand what these things are and why they happen and arise. So another reason why I don't think I'll ever do music world building, because it's like, it's way deeper than people I think give it credit for. Even if you're just going to write a bit of flavor text, it's way, way deeper.
And even 12 tone equal temperament is a highly kind of technologically demanding concept to be able to divide evenly like that. It is pretty close to a lot of historical things, but it is a very modern concession and compromise. Yeah. Precisely.
So yeah, I guess that's my random music world building thoughts. I don't think anyone's still listening, Bill. So shall we bid the 0 listeners adieu?
Thank you very much to chat for hanging out with us earlier. I know you're all gone now.
Yeah, thanks, chat. I echo Bill's sentiments. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting the show on Patreon. We will see you next month for the Christmas pub quiz, and then thereafter for I guess media review in the new year. Yeah, have a great time, and until next time,
Edgar out.